My name's Andy Schmuckler. Uh, I pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the showdown that's coming between democracy and fascism, also known as the showdown between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump about whether American democracy. Anyway, I've got a lot of worry that I've been sitting on for actually a very long time. I've actually felt that I could see fascism rising in this country. In a dangerous way since 2004. But we have a real showdown here if Trump gets elected after everything that we've seen, everything that has been shown about his crimes and all kinds of things. If he could win this election, a chapter of American history, what American history has been since the founding of the United States, for sure, will come to an end. So I got a lot of worry, and so therefore I follow things very closely. And I got to tell you, over the last week and maybe 2 weeks, I've been feeling more and more sense that I can see that where things are moving, where things are. I think I can see where things are moving, even if Kamala Harris didn't have the enormous advantage of a ground game, hers being, I guess, by far the best ever, and Trump's being really pretty comparatively impotent. Even without that, it seems as though the election is going to move. When you look at like ratios of female voters and male voters and the early vote and the party registration, I read Simon Rosenberg's Hopium message every day. And I have to confess that there are a couple places where he explains this and that, and it gets very complicated about the early vote in Nevada and all that kind of stuff. And I want to raise my hand and ask, could you explain how those numbers mean something favorable for Kamala's chances? Is this good news for our side? So sometimes I don't understand, but I think we can trust him. And in addition to that, there's all kinds of other data that seems to be around. I mean, a poll just came out from Iowa. The pollster has a impeccable, high reputation for accuracy, and I saw the record, her record being shown, and she has Kamala up by 3 in Iowa. And Iowa is this pollster's specialty. Now, then I get a message from The Economist, my inbox, and it says, outlying Iowa poll suggests landslide for Kamala, but it's probably just a fluke. I have a subscription to The Economist. So I don't know what the argument is for us being a fluke. But even if it's anywhere close, for Iowa even to be up for grabs, it suggests, and then there are a lot of other pieces that seem to me to point toward it's moving. I saw an article about the late-breaking, formerly undecideds are breaking fairly heavily for Kamala, 60-something. I mean, there's just all kinds of evidence that I see, and then I ask myself, when I get things like that from The Economist, it reminds me that I'm kind of afraid to go to the New York Times front page, because the story that one finds there kindles the stress on my heart. It sounds much more worrisome than it looks to me, and I'm wondering, am I fooling myself? I think I'm paying attention to all the relevant information, but am I being fooled, or am I fooling myself about all this movement that I sense that we're going to have an outcome that's not razor thin, not a landslide in the old sense, which is what I hoped for. I mean, I'm always hoping the American people will be better than they turn out to be, or at least always in the age of Trump. I thought there were only a third of Americans who actually favor fascism, which is scary enough, but it means that 2/3 aren't, and it should be possible to present this choice so that people understand. Well, that's really what the basic choice is. It doesn't have to do with immigration policy, except as, fascism has a way of relating to that. It has a way of relating to abortion. It has a way of relating to just about everything. But it's basically fascism that people would be choosing. I thought, well, if there's only a third of people who want fascism, it should be possible to tell the American public that this is, in fact, the choice. But evidently, even though there's 40, we'll see what Trump has now. I've just posted a piece on Daily Kos about how I think Trump is destroying himself this past week with the Madison Square Garden and whether they like it or not, and the sex act with a microphone. I thought, here's a guy that's sort of, for whatever reason, and that's where it gets interesting. I think that this shows a pattern of what evil leaders tend to destroy. And it shows something about the nature of evil. And when we're dealing with Donald Trump, we're dealing with a guy who's, in almost every way conceivable, acts and speaks in the world in a way which fosters greater brokenness of all kind. I mean, he is so completely under the thrall of brokenness. Not like Richard Nixon, who had a criminal side to him, but no, Donald Trump is sort of across the board. So I am watching this guy whose patterns deserve to be considered in the concept of an idea of a destructive force or a force of evil. That this guy has been acting in a way which tends to bring himself the disaster that he presumably, consciously, is working hard or wanting desperately to have, to stay out of jail, but in addition to get the power to compel everybody to his will with his immunity and all that stuff. But there's something about what he's been doing with his campaign lately, which seems really like it's designed to be self-destructive. And I write about how there's a much larger pattern that we see with respect to evil, and we've got it in our mythologies, that evil tends to destroy itself, and evil people tend to destroy the things that they consciously or at least explicitly say they're trying to accomplish. It's about brokenness in it, and there is such a thing as a force of brokenness in our world. But anyway, I'm wondering, why is it that when I go to the New York Times front page, and that stands for a lot, that I get this sense of stress that the reality, as I see it, doesn't call for? Now, maybe I'm fooling myself, and I'll look for ways that might be, but I haven't found, I think I'm getting pretty good amount of information and seeing a picture which isn't, like out there dazzling neon lights, but a discernible movement toward what might be even something like a 55-45 finish. In that direction. We've been surprised lately. Election returns have been surprising, like in Wisconsin with the Supreme Court judge elected to it was supposed to be a real close race, and she won, by 11? And you can find other elections in recent times where, Kansas on the issue of abortion, Ohio on the issue of abortion. There's stuff going on, and I think it's breaking in the direction of Kamala Harris. And a lot of it has to do with the women. The way Trump has been dealing with things having to do with women, the way Kamala has been addressing what's been going on with women. And I get the impression that for the first time in a very long time, the Democrat may get half or more of white women's vote. Anyway, there's a lot of evidence out there. So what's going on with the New York Times and the wet blanket that the Economist, I mean, I didn't get to read why they think it's a fluke, but Koss wrote a piece on Daily Kos, which really made the case for this is a credible person. How a fluke? Well, if I don't know what the argument is, but why is the press, now people sometimes, I think I don't understand the press these days. So people think that they make it into a horse race because that sells newspapers or something. Well, really? Are they that petty that they don't do their job? I mean, do they not see what I see about that movement? Why isn't that the story? If it's valid, why would the newspapers be either not seeing it or seeing the same thing I see, but choosing to represent it in a way which scares me away from looking very closely at the New York Times main page on their website these days? I just don't need the stress, but I also don't really understand what's going on. I can't see that that I'm fooling myself, but I do maintain the possibility in my mind. And I don't understand why the press is handling everything the way the press has been. I don't mean things like Jeff Bezos serving his own personal interests at the expense of the proper role of a newspaper in a situation like this. I don't mean that, but so is there movement here toward a fairly clear Kamala Harris victory? Not that the battle would be over then, because we know that Trump is going to try his old tricks again with lies. So why? I can't believe that they're so petty that they would act like it's a horse race when it's starting to be one horse is pulling ahead. I doubt it sells that many more papers. And that's a story too. Actually, it is an important story. There's a sense in which this drama is being played out in presidential American politics. From the beginning, when it was Trump versus Biden and all the things that have happened through this with the Supreme Court, the whole thing is going to be a remarkable chapter in American history. It's going to be as important as, well, I don't know, maybe this is overstating it, the Civil War, actually, as a defining experience in the national life. What happens now is going to be a phenomenon that history is going to look at with peering deeply into the human phenomenon. I mean, this has been an extraordinary time in American history. Stuff that we would have thought unthinkable back in the 50s and even the 60s with Vietnam and all that. The idea that fascism might take over the country, unthinkable. What happens now is a window into very deep phenomena. Important to understand if we want to understand the world in which we're operating. When Nazi Germany arose and set the whole world on fire, people asked questions about what does it mean that the most civilized society in the world, by some definitions of civilization, that was how Germany was seen by many, could become swept up in this dark, barbaric, cruel, evil force. What does civilization mean if that could happen? I don't think that. I don't think the answers that were arrived at were as good as one would hope. As good as we probably need. And now we're here in America where we have an election coming up where, according to our mainstream press, America might choose to re-elect to the presidency a man whose record, right out in the open, is of every conceivable vice and abuse that a president could have. I won't go through the list. Historians are going to want to know how did that happen? And I think we should know that too. But here's the thing about this moment, if I'm right, that the pro-democracy side, with its enormous enthusiasm and its commitment to the pretty much the best set of values for a society that where people work together to make things right. They're going to want to know what happened that saved the day, like I think is happening. And one of the things that they're going to see is that there was an upswelling of commitment to the best of values within the American people. The enthusiasm of the people who 75,000 people attending a speech on the ellipse up to the Washington Monument. A testimony to the rising of the spirit of the pro-democracy side. It is important that historians recognize that what's happened, if we get this movement, is something really quite fine and something quite beautiful. That a lot's gone wrong in America, but the center of gravity, the preponderance of the American people, are committed to the better values and not to the worse. That's what I think is being shown. And Donald Trump is making it easier. I mean, he's showing, he's not cleaning up his act, he's dirtying up his act. He's saying more and more outrageous things. Like, if you guys haven't figured out just how indecent a thing I am, here, let me show you some more, as he's been doing this week, whether they like it or not. Filleting a microphone stand. Not taking back what the stuff that got said at his Madison Square Garden event that was an echo of a Nazi Madison Square Garden event in 1939. You want to know how ugly I am? Let me show you. And all the evidence is his ugliness doesn't appeal to a majority of Americans. The ugliness is rejected by a majority of Americans. That's why there was no red wave. That's Carrie Lake, the guy in Pennsylvania, the guy in New Hampshire, Herschel Walker. I mean, this was not wherever they put forward people that were basically inappropriate in the MAGA direction, the majority rejected it. But he's getting uglier. And I see that as self-destructive. And I invite you to take a look at that self-destructiveness and how that fits into an understanding of how evil operates. Thank you. Appreciate your listening. If you subscribe, support anything you feel like doing and support. If you look at my Better Human story, where I try to put together a integrated picture with a variety of what's happened to our species and the nature of the challenges we face. I hope you'll go to my website,